All right, here we are. Nige.
Here we are, George.
Welcome to Men's Corner, and thanks so much for coming. We're sitting here in beautiful sunny Eastbourne today.
Yeah.
And we just thought we'll record this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had this planned since last year, didn't we?
Yeah. It's taken a while to get around to it, but
Yeah.
you know, we got there in the end, and it's great to be in your new place. Such a lovely view, and it's a beautiful day.
Yes, work in progress like us.
So it came together in the end.
Yeah, I wanted to do it in person because it's different.
Yeah, of course.
We do meet anyway, so
Yeah.
it's gonna be good. And I just wanted to go over some from the very beginning, actually, from because you have such a fascinating story, man. It's incredible. I don't know how much of it you're actually able to see, but to me, and I was like, wow, there's so many things that I wanted to ask you in particular details about your story. But before even we begin with your story,
Yeah.
could you tell us a little bit more about your parents and how much you know about them?
They are both from Trinidad and Tobago, which is the southernmost Caribbean island, about 6 miles off the coast of Venezuela. And so my mother was from a village called Freeport in central Trinidad. And as far as I know, my dad was from another village nearby called Purcell. So and this is vague knowledge, this is quite vague, but you know, they had a relationship, and my mother was, I think, brought up as a Muslim because my grandfather, I never knew them. I never really had much contact with them, but my grandfather was a Hindu, but he converted to Islam to marry his wife, and hence the name Mohammed.
Okay, hence the name.
Yeah, because my grandfather converted to Islam to marry his wife. Otherwise, I would have a different name. And I'm actually, I probably prefer the name Mohammed to the other name, but even though I've struggled with the name Mohammed. But so I took my mother's maiden name, and my mother came over to the UK in 1960.
But could you tell me before that, like, what was going on in Trinidad then?
In Trinidad?
Because I don't know anything.
Yeah, I don't know too much, to be honest with you, but Trinidad, 40% African, 40% Asian. And basically, when slavery was abolished in 1834, I do believe, Britain did a deal with India and brought thousands of what they called indentured labourers.
Oh, I know about that.
Yeah. So there was a diaspora. Lots of different nations have diaspora, a dispersion of, throughout history that are scattered. So I actually am a diasporic person in that sense, because they dispersed from India and different parts of Asia to take the place of slaves as indentured labourers. So I descend from them. So the first boat, it was called the Fitzal Rajak, was the first boat to arrive from India in Trinidad in May 1845. And I descend from that. So they settled there, and obviously there was Africans there as well who went there. So Trinidad, like I say, 40% African, 40% Asian, Indian. They don't get on, by the way. Their approach to life is very different. And that is a story in itself. So
was it peaceful by the time your mom and dad grew up? Even though you didn't know anything about your dad, I bet you know something about your mom's childhood, do you?
A little bit. But as you know, I was put in a foster home just after I was born in the UK, because my mum came to the UK, fell pregnant, put me in a home. So my mother grew up in Trinidad and left at the age of 24. So there was a big family. She had a big family. They were quite tight knit. It's a little village, a bit like your village in Bulgaria. Everybody knew each other.
Oh yeah.
So the village I didn't grow up in this village, but my mother was from this village called Freeport. You know, everybody is close knit. They eat together. They're very close knit, and they live close to each other. And she grew up in that village in a big family, and left at the age of 24. I don't know too much else, to be honest with you, about my mother's childhood. That's it really.
Okay.
It's quite vague.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there is a story that you do know, and so tell us about her coming over here. There was something about the boat, I remember, and it's even in the book, isn't it?
Yeah. Now this is 5 years later. So I was born in 1960.
Okay.
My mother came over to the UK to study nursing in 1960, and when she found out she was pregnant, she asked one of her colleagues, if she knew of anywhere that she could put me in a foster home or something like that, because she wasn't able to look after me, which is what she said.
Okay.
And anyway, she found somewhere, and so she basically put me into a foster home when I was 8 weeks old.
Cool.
So I didn't know where I lived for the first 8 weeks.
Wow.
It was somewhere in London. I don't know where. So I was born in Surrey, in Woking in Surrey, and lived with my mother wherever she was living, in a bedsit somewhere in London, or maybe Putney, or maybe. I think it was somewhere in London, but I'm not too sure where I lived for the first 8 weeks. So 8 weeks old, she put me in a foster home, and so I grew up in the foster home, and I was the only coloured kid in an all-white foster home.
Wow.
And I went to an all-white school as well. So so the first 5 years, obviously I grew up in the foster home, and the first 5 years again is quite vague. I think I felt close to my foster mother. There was only a foster mother, not a foster father, and it was quite chaotic. There were babies and children coming and going all the time.
Right.
Ringing the doorbell, to be fostered. Oh yeah, it was quite chaotic.
How many they could take? I mean.
Well, I tell you, in the war they had 21 children, man. So, there wasn't 21 when I was there, but there was,
Right.
children coming and going all the time. Yeah. So it was a bit chaotic,
I can imagine. Yeah.
But I was very fortunate in one sense, because I stayed there. I didn't go from one home to another. Lots of kids do.
Yeah.
In one sense I was fortunate. But what was one of my deepest struggles was the kind of the cultural side, because my mother was from Trinidad and I was born in England, and I didn't even grow up with an Asian family. So I grew up in a white foster home. So this became an issue of identity as I hit my teenage years, and I'll get to that. The first 5 years regarding the boat, when I was 5, I'm just giving you a bit of context for the boat. So the first 5 years I grew up in the foster home. And then when I was 5, my mother, I think, as I remember, came and visited me every now and again, but she was like a stranger to me, and I used to scream.
Really?
Yeah, because she was coloured.
Wow.
Because everyone was white in the foster home, and I used to scream when I saw her.
Wow.
I used to run, and because it's like, who is this strange lady? This strange woman. So I used to run and scream. And when I was 5, she basically took me back to Trinidad. Okay, and it was, now looking back, as I have looked into childhood wounds, as I went into that journey, that was massive. What happened what I'm about to tell you. So because it was big, it was very deep trauma actually. And so when I was 5, my mother, went through the process of trying to take me back to Trinidad to give me a home. And I understand that her intentions were good.
Yeah.
She wanted to give me a chance with my physical blood relatives back in Trinidad. Yeah, a bit like you, if you were born here, your mum shows up and thinks, I think I should take him back to Bulgaria. Yeah. Kind of thing, you know, because it's his culture. Yeah. So that was her motive, you know. But I screamed for 6 weeks and I never stopped screaming. And I was traumatized. And so I went on a boat from Southampton, the port of Southampton, to Trinidad, which is a 9-day boat journey. And I was traumatized on the boat, man. Screaming. I mean, I remember, you see, I had bonded to my foster mother for the first 5 years. Just, you know, like they say, you know, the first 5 or 7 years. Yeah. Show me the boy and I'll show you the man, kind of thing. Yeah. So, you know, in I think psychology, you know, the first sort of 5-7 years, they really shape you, especially your attachment to the mother, apparently. So the bond to the mother, which is the first 5 years, is very foundational for how you turn out and your identity, apparently. That's what I understand. One psychologist, a guy called Balby. So the attachment to the mother, then the father takes over in a healthy situation. Yeah. So my mother takes me away. I've bonded to my foster mother, white foster mother. There's no father. Chaotic foster home. I'm taken away, and when she's taken me away, I'm being taken away what I thought was my mother. Yeah. Obviously, I'm just 5.
Of course. Yeah.
So I'm screaming my head off. And as I look back, it was like I was kidnapped. And I had to be shown that about 10 years ago, actually.
You had to feel it again.
I had to feel it again. And it was like I was abducted and actually kidnapped. And when somebody used that word abducted and kidnapped, I mean, it hit me, man, big time. I've never been told that. Because you know what it's like, man. Men are very good at denial. Yeah. You know, man, we've been rowing down that river in Egypt a long time, right? You know, denial. So, you know, we're very deeply ingrained in that. And I had denied by telling myself, actually, my mum did the best she could. Now, on one hand, she did, but actually I had to face the other side of that and the trauma of it. So, we went to Southampton. You know, I'm screaming my head off from, you know.
How old were you again?
5.
You were 5.
I was 5, yeah.
And you remember it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do remember.
That says a lot.
It's a vivid in my mind. Because my foster mother, we actually bonded, and in some way we bonded, me and my foster mother, and we, you know, we were both traumatized. Actually, I think my mother was just my foster mother was very distressed, and I was screaming. Well, you can imagine, you know, any child who's grown up with their biological parents after 5 years, then somebody shows up and takes them away and says, actually, I'm your mother. Yeah. I mean, think how traumatic that's going to be. You know, it's a no-brainer, right? Yeah. So, on the boat, my mother is very seasick. She gets very seasick. And I'm traumatized. I'm screaming my head off. 9 days on a boat. 9 days.
So you never really calmed down?
No, not for 6 weeks.
Wow, you're a fighter, man.
Yeah, not for 6 weeks.
You don't give up.
Well, I was traumatized. You know, I mean, I had to go back into that trauma. But
so what happened afterwards? After those 9 days?
Well, we got to Trinidad 9 days later, and you know, we were met by relatives, and who were my relatives, but were the complete strangers for me because I've just arrived on another planet. Yeah. You know, I've just like. Aliens have just kind of landed, abducted me into a spaceship and taken me into another galaxy. Yeah, and that's what it was like, actually, to me as a 5-year-old kid. Yeah. So anyway, I'm there. Went to the village, stayed in my grandparents' house. I recall, I can still picture the house actually, and I went there when I was 38. Again, I'll tell you about that. And I've got vivid memories. Now look, some of those memories actually are quite good. I remember, for example, I remember this saxuma tree at the bottom of the drive. So look, you've got a steep bit of a drive here. there was a satsuma tree at the end of the drive, and I'd go and pick satsumas every day, and I'd go and meet my cousins coming home from school, you know. So, you know, there was a hammock in the garden. They all have hammocks in the gardens in Trinidad.
It's a good life in many ways.
And you know, because it's the Caribbean, right? It's very hot and the rest of it. You know, so there are some memories. I mean, I've even got a scar on my arm from Trinidad, and it's, you know, maybe I'm kind of glad in a way, because it's like, yeah, that's a souvenir from Trinidad. You know, it's like, yeah, I know exactly where I got that scar. You know, but there's other scars. You know. So anyway, yeah, I for 6 weeks I was predominantly very traumatized, and I screamed my head off. And my mum basically put me on a plane on my own and sent me back.
Oh, really? After how long? After 6 weeks?
6 weeks.
So they couldn't handle you?
Yeah, they realised I was screaming for my foster mother.
Wow.
Never stopped? No, I never stopped. I was screaming my head off constantly. Wow. Although, like I said, you know, the good parts, the satsuma tree and all the rest of it. But I mean...
But that's in between the screaming.
Yeah, that's in between the screaming, right? A family friend actually came back with me. I didn't know her, I never met her before and never seen her before and ever again. But I basically flew back. They put me on the plane with a family friend. I went back to London, to Heathrow, and came back to the UK. And I was met at the airport by my foster mother and one of my foster sisters, who was one of the oldest foster sisters, who came to the airport and picked me up. And I grew up in the foster home in England.
So when did you leave the foster home?
Well, I tried leaving many times. In my teenage years, 19, 18.
You tried leaving?
What I mean is I tried running away one time.
Okay.
And but because...
Well, let's talk about that, because
yeah,
looks like something's been happening there between that moment when you came back and your teens. So what was happening in you then while you were there, growing up?
What was happening
in you between the time you came back and your teens when you wanted to leave?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I've thought about this a lot, actually. Now, when I came back, I was 5, and I went to school, obviously. But you know, one of the best things was that I became very interested in football, and it gave me something. And so one day somebody noticed me playing football, okay? And this guy, he obviously thought I was pretty good at football. And he wanted me to join his local football team. He's putting a football team together called Chesworth Tigers, okay? He came to the house, and he had a talk with me and my foster mother, and said that he would like me to join his football team. So I joined this football team, okay? Now, there's something about putting a football kit on. Now, I later on, I'm jumping the gun a bit, but it's relevant, okay? You know, I later worked with street kids in Kathmandu in Nepal, and worked with street kids who are on the street, okay? But when they put a football kit on, it gives them something. It gives them a sense of dignity. I'm a part of a team.
Tribe.
I belong somewhere, like a tribal thing, but I belong to something. I'm part of a team. Mm-hmm. That sense of belonging, and it actually, it does a lot for kids. You know, more than you realise, actually. So anyway, I had that when I was 7 or 8. So I got into football when I was 7 or 8, and I started supporting a football team. And as you said, tribal, and that's very important, very significant, actually, George. So I was part of this football team from the age of about 8 till 12. And it gave me every Saturday, I just loved Saturdays because I loved football and I was quite good at it. The two things that I realised I was good at was spelling. I was good at spelling. I still am. I don't know why. I was just good at spelling. I wasn't taught it, and I wasn't taught anything really in the foster home. Now, don't get me wrong. I bonded to my foster mother, and you know, there was an affection between us, and you know, some of the other kids. I never got really close to the foster brothers and sisters. There was some...
What about male role models? Did you have any?
What's that? Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question?
What about the coaches, the football coaches?
Well, it's funny because I was thinking that driving here today, actually, George. Thinking, actually, that guy who got me into the football team, he was the only male, the only guy that was in my life at that time. But it seemed quite quick. It went very quick, you know, those 3 or 4 years. It was just, he didn't really have much input into my life in terms of like, you know, guiding me or discipline or anything like that, because he wasn't my father.
No.
So I didn't have any male role models, and I have never had male role models in my entire life.
But you felt okay as a boy with other boys. You felt okay kicking the football, unlike me. I mean, I was I didn't feel like a man amongst men. You know what I mean? Boys. I mean, you played football with boys. So where do you think this came from?
Well, I think because I felt that like I was good at it. And that gives you a sense of confidence.
So is it because that guy showed you that you were
Well, he
good at
noticed
it?
me.
Right.
And it's like, you need to be noticed, right?
Okay.
Because if your father doesn't notice you, I think you're good at this, George.
Mm-hmm.
I see those skills in you. And you're really interested in that. You spend a lot of time doing that. You know, we need to have other people notice us when we're growing up.
Yeah.
Because that can guide our life. That can be where your skills are.
Yeah.
And what you love. That can be your heart.
Yeah.
It's like, I notice your heart. And you know, if a child has that from a good, healthy parent, you know, that actually can lay a foundation for their identity, their lives, their occupation, all the rest of it. I didn't have that. But, you know, male role models, you know, yes, you know, this guy, he got me into the football team. It was great wearing the kit, eating the oranges at half time. It was, you know, Saturdays were great. But it was very minimal in terms of a role model, I have to say. Yeah, the input, you know, it wasn't like a father figure. He had 2 sons, and it wasn't like a father figure as such. And there were no male role models in the foster home at all. None at all. It was a foster mother, but no father. Mm-hmm. So, you know, from the word go, from the time I was conceived in the womb, you know, rejection from the father, because when my father, I found out that my mother was pregnant, he disappeared, never saw him.
Wow.
You know, and he just...
The child in the womb feels
so
these
in the
things.
womb, yeah.
People don't know about this thing.
Yeah.
It's so true, yeah.
So, you know, I went deep, and I had to go back there, you know, even back to the womb. So, so from about 8 till 12, I was into football. But here's the thing, man. I started smoke when I was 11. I just went reckless, man. From 8 till 10, I was into the football, fairly stable. Used to go out and into the forest and collect conkers with some friends locally, some neighbours, as I recall. Got into football, man, big time. And I used to collect football albums, you know, and you'd compare, you know, some of the pictures that you'd collect with your you know, school friends and with some of the neighbours, you know. And that was great. And that felt exciting because it kind of absorbed my life, you know. When I was like 8, 9, 10, football kind of was my life. Yeah. And but then when I was 11, when I went to secondary school, it just really went downhill.
Did anything happen in particular, or just the whole thing as an experience?
Well, actually, just one thing actually before I get to the secondary school, because then it starts to go downhill. Okay. You know, the amazing thing is that when I got back from Trinidad after that trauma, which actually started to really manifest later on in life and through the lifestyle that I had, which was deeply rootless, and I'll go into that. But in terms of like how that affects your relationship with women, the first girl that I adored, I was 7 years old.
Wow.
Because we used to play kiss chase in the junior school. And the amazing thing is, I still remember her, right? I was 7 years old. She was an Italian girl called Michelle Massimo. And whenever we played Kiss Chase, I was always running after her. Because, man, I loved her, you know, because she was so lovely. She was so gorgeous, you know. And, you know, I even used to go and knock on her door where she lived and then run away. But, you know, looking back, George, I find that quite amazing, actually, because I think I was traumatized big time from the boat journey, 6 weeks in Trinidad, you know, screaming my head off, coming back on a plane. You know, that was a huge, massive disruption in my life.
Yeah. Speaking of disruption, just make sure we keep the cable here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and despite that life-changing disruption, I kind of had a degree of stability. Well, at junior school, I'm just saying this before I get to the secondary school when it started going downhill, because I'm just remembering that actually, you know, I was into football, like I say, and I played for that school team as well when I was 7. Well, you know, I was in that team, and this girl, Michelle Massimo, Italian girl, part of a big Italian family. But man, I just loved her, man, and I just would always run after her when we played Kiss Chase. So I just wonder, I thought, man, I had something that had presence.
And she represented something that you never had.
Yeah. So
a mother figure.
Because I had no male role models, and I'd had that massive trauma just 2 years before. And I'm still a child, and I'm able to play Kiss Chase and actually, you know, run after this girl, you know. It's like, you know, whatever. I mean, I know we are very resilient as human beings, but, you know, I kind of look back on that and think,
there are blessings that are not everything is stolen.
No.
I think depending on also the spiritual covering of the family, whatever, of what's traveled down, that's not been polluted. Some children, even with the trauma, there's things that come through without trauma. Relatively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, probably it's never. I don't think it's ever going to be 100% all dark and broken and pain and trauma. You know, there will be other things that have life in it. You know. But we can't underestimate, the trauma and the pain, you know. So anyway, so that was. I'm 11 now, and I go to secondary school, and it started going downhill there.
Okay. Yeah. What did that look like?
Well, I started getting a criminal record, and
really that early?
Yeah, and smoking, drinking, fighting. I just went crazy.
So when were you first arrested? Do you remember?
Well, I was 12, 13, broke into a house.
Wow.
But the kids that I was hanging out with were kind of in Borstal.
Okay.
Borstal was like a boys' prison, you know. And, you know, I became friends with a guy that had been to Borstal, and he was, you know, he was a bit of a criminal. You know, is breaking the.
Was he older than you?
I don't remember. I think maybe. I remember his name, Richard Shepherd, and we used to call him Shep. But he was.
Shep, if you're watching this.
Yeah. It's been redemption, Shep.
You can change, man.
Yeah. But anyway, so I got into some things with him, and we broke into a house, and committed a burglary. I was only 12, 13. But I was drinking, and I started smoking at 11 when I went to secondary school, and just went into chaos. Just was really reckless.
So what about the other boys around you now? You and this guy, Richard, did the gang grow, or did you sort of stay together as a core team?
It wasn't for that long.
Okay.
But I first started getting in trouble with him.
Right.
And I first started getting in trouble with him, but you know, I didn't hang out with him for too long. But you know, I constantly was in trouble with the police from the age of 12, 13, right up until I was 20, and a reckless adolescence, chaos, reckless probation, even, you know, still breaking the law when I was on probation. So secondary school, 11 to 16, I just, and you see this again, you see, because there's no male role models, no foundation that was laid really. You know, even though, yes, I came back to the foster home and all the rest of it because I thought that was normal. But, you know, I was getting in trouble all the time, and it was becoming a habit and actually a bit of a lifestyle. I was hardly at school. I would we'd just bunk off school all the time. I mean, that was like, I did that a lot. And I was hardly at school because we'd just bunk off the classes and go somewhere, get drunk and whatever. Yeah, just chaos. And even, you know, breaking the law whilst I was bunking off school, drinking, getting drunk and, you know, breaking the law.
So how did you relate to older men, like those policemen or teachers? Did you have problem with male authority figures?
Well,
just to say the cable.
Yeah,
so
sorry,
you might
sorry.
want to just keep your hand here on the.
Oh, just here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're not touching the cable.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Me and technology, that's another thing.
Same.
Well, I've got memories of like at school, at secondary school, not good memories. I hated certain subjects and certain teachers. There was this very strict teacher. And one I remember got good memories of like he'd get me to stand up in front of the whole class and actually give an answer to a question that he knew I couldn't answer, and it was humiliating. And I tell you what, I used to dread double maths on a Thursday afternoon. Like, how do I remember that? We remember things, right?
Yeah.
This is like over 40 years ago, man. Thursday afternoon, I had double period of mathematics. I hated it, man, because I just didn't get it. And it seemed so long, a double period of maths. And this guy would get me up. Mohammed, stand up. What's an obtuse angle? And I'd be humiliated. And I would hate it. It was humiliating. And that sowed some bad seeds. That sowed some seeds that were not good.
Like what?
Well, because I internalized, kind of the message of the wound, rejection, abandonment. Therefore, you see, if your parents abandon you, they're supposed to be the only people in the world that you can trust and who love you, right?
To go back to them, no matter what happens outside.
Yeah, no matter what, right? It's meant to be a safe place, right?
Yeah.
The home, it's meant to be a safe place. That's the theory. It's meant to be a safe place. Your mother and father are meant to be the ones that you can trust more than anybody, who love you unconditionally, and they're safe. That's what they're meant to be. But if you have the complete opposite, and you are abandoned by the very people out of all the world who are supposed to be safe and who you can trust, and they're not, they're the complete opposite, and they're unsafe. So it's like my mother got rid of me. She just dumped me. That's what it felt like. I was inconvenient because she was a nurse, a young student nurse. She couldn't bring me up, so she said. And so it felt like, just dumping me, inconvenience,
Okay.
So, that goes deep. And so that's what I mean, is you internalize and you believe the message of that.
So what do you think you believed in front of that blackboard on a Thursday morning?
Yeah, so
that's not for me, or I can't deal with...
I'm useless.
I'm useless.
I'm useless. I'm no good at maths. I'm no good at anything. That can be, the message from the initial wound, and then it's repeated. It's like a secondary thing. It's like a secondary trauma type thing, where it's repeated. And then it gets
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, yeah, it can. It gets consolidated and embedded in your heart. It's like the arrows, the message of the arrows. The arrow gets lodged in your heart.
Yeah.
And there's a message with that arrow. And then we tend to make agreements with those arrows. So, that's what I meant. The humiliation is the...
John Eldridge has a book, which Sacred Romance, and there I think he talked about the
arrows. That's right, that's it. Yeah, well, that's where I got it from, and that's what and it's very true, very true.
And with arrows comes a message. It's not just hurt, but what do you believe because of your hurt, and then you become someone. And the good news is that actually you don't need to stay, but we'll get to there. So that was what was like for you at school. In terms of your criminal activities, what happened after that? You started first with Richard, with Shep, and then did you progress onto heavier crimes? Because were you a football hooligan or something like that?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I mean, I got into football hooliganism, but again, it's like you said, George.
What did that look like?
Well, first of all, if I just backtrack a little bit, when I first broke into the house, the first thing I did to break the law, it was fundamentally about identity. It was about identity, okay? And so an identity was starting to be shaped. It was a turning point in my life. We all have turning points in our lives.
Yeah.
And those turning points can be for good or bad. And they, the painful turning points, you normally shut our heart down. You take a vow, you make inner vows. I'm not going to let this happen to me again, or whatever it is, usually I will always, or I will never. That's a clue.
Yeah.
That's a clue that you've made a vow, right? And that, we can still be doing that, still making agreements with that. So I think I'm backtracking just to say that actually, without that foundation in your childhood, you haven't got anything to build on. And it's like Gordon Dalby with that parable at the end of his book, Sons and Fathers. It's such a powerful parable. The lion cub.
Is it Sons of the Father?
Sons of the Father.
Yeah.
So the lion cub cut off from its mother very early. It bonds to the mother, but the lion cub is cut off from the mother. And then the lion cub is roaming through the jungle, hungry, and it's in a story of survival. But the lion cub bonds to sheep. It meets some sheep as part of the parable. And it bonds to these sheep, and then it starts to make noises like a lamb instead of a lion. Because its identity is being formed in a wrong way. Because it's been abruptly cut off from the mother. It's roaming through the jungle, hungry, living in a story of survival.
I'll keep your hand here. You can keep your hand here.
Oh, yeah. Living in a story of survival. We all know that, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Jungle, hungry, story of survival. So basically, that was the script that was being written for me when I look back. And we can all live out of a script that we feel has been written for us.
So when things like bad things happen to you, when you suffered, then what were some of the vows internally, subconscious vows that you took? I will never trust, or
probably I will never trust.
I'll never amount to anything, things like that.
I will never. I think it's a deep question, man, because I think looking back on my story, which is going to unfold as I begin to tell you, but rootlessness and not knowing what a home was like. Okay. I've never known what a home is like.
Right.
And I still don't. So in 62 years, I've never known what a home is, or even a family. Yeah. So I think deep inside, probably unconsciously, I will never know what a home is. And look, I'm kind of partly guessing, but I as I look back in the way I lived my life, for example, I went on, to move 50 to 60 times in my life.
That's huge,
man. I mean, what is that about?
I've never met anyone who's moved that.
Well, yeah, there you go. What's that about? Well, that's about rootlessness.
50 to 60 times.
Yes, I counted once. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 50 to 60 times. Now that is that ain't healthy, right? Yeah. So what's that about? Well, that's a defining thing, and
it's a symptom.
It's a symptom, and it's a massive symptom, and it's a symptom of, I believe, an unconscious vow that I will never know what home is like. And it goes back to 5 on the boat going to Trinidad. Foster home, first 5 years, abrupt, huge abrupt disruption of my life. Boat, trauma 6 weeks, back in England, growing up in a home, but then it starts to manifest.
Yeah.
It starts to manifest. And it does. It starts to manifest.
Yeah.
So, no male role models. So in terms of the criminal, in other words, it wasn't, don't get me wrong, I didn't go into major crime, but I could have done. I mean, I ended up in prison when I was 19, and I'll get there. But I'm 13, 14. I had my first girlfriend at 14. 15, sorry. And I was big, but I'm still breaking the law. And she's got a family. She's white. She's got a mother and father, brother and a sister. It's I say normal, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a conventional status quo family, yeah? But this is alien to me. It's like, what, family? I don't speak that language. And I haven't learned that language well in my life. So I think that looking back, in answer to your question, it was an identity that was being formed because of the turning point. Breaking the law when I was 12, 13, huge turning point. But then other turning points of when I was 5. So these turning points, they shape our identity, I believe. Yeah. They actually shape our story and our identity because of what we do with those turning points.
Yeah.
So I'm talking traumatic, massive disruption, turning points, deep wounds.
And you didn't have a father who, if you went home to saying, I'm not going to be good at anything, to correct you, said, no, you will be and I'll show you how. I'll teach you. You know, you didn't have anyone to redirect the flow of your internal energy where you were going. Yeah, exactly.
And although my foster mother, you know, she fed me and clothed me, but that's it. So I had physical needs met. I was fed and I was clothed, but that's it. Nothing else.
No, you need a father.
So there was deprivation. There was deprivation of emotional needs, of, you know, vocational needs, what skills I had and things like that. None of that was met. And so that was a huge rupture within my being in terms of occupation. And that's been a major part of my story. So in terms of the criminal thing, it was about bonding and attachment, because you attach to something, right? So if you don't attach to your mother and father, you will attach to something else. You know, I mean, I believe that we are created to bond to God, to our Creator. So if you don't bond to God, you will have bonding substitutes.
But isn't it interesting, because God doesn't just drop this bond from the sky.
No.
If you haven't bonded with your mom and dad, you find it hard to bond with anything, including God.
Absolutely. In fact, maybe especially God.
Yes.
Because trust issues, you see.
Mom, dad, whatever. Yeah.
Because of trust, you see. Yeah. If your trust is being violated in those formative years, which it has been in countless numbers of people, men and women in the world, you know, and people listening to this will know exactly what I'm talking about, that their ability to trust was violated and broken in those formative years.
Yeah.
And then if you internalize the wound, you have contempt for the wound, especially men. Mm-hmm. If you have contempt for the wound, then you're living out of shame. Underneath there is shame. There's sadness, there's anger, there's layers.
Yeah.
But if you get to the root without that foundation from your childhood, you know, what's underneath? What's the foundation then? If it's not a good foundation, well, obviously abandonment. There's no identity. Huge vacuum. What fills the vacuum? Shame. Voices. You're no good. You make agreements with it. Yeah, I'm no good, and you have contempt for it. Because the stereotype of masculinity in the West is you've got to be strong.
Yeah.
You can't be weak, and you mustn't show mustn't show weakness, and you, above all, you cannot cry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have contempt for the wound to the extent that we buy the stereotype of the macho version of masculinity.
And now it's a new stereotype, if you've noticed.
Well, yes,
Now it's the other one. So now, it's both. We're basically, you know, screwed both ways. Wow.
So maybe the criminal was, who knows, it was a destructive identity, because you either create or destruct, right? You either will create something good and healthy to offer the world, to offer other people, and that's healthy masculinity. It offers initiating life-giving energy that creates, that gives life to others. If you're living out the wound, you will actually self-destruct, and you'll destroy other things. So I was going into destruction, self-destruction, through breaking the law. An identity was being formed out of that.
And all this time you had a girlfriend.
Well, I had a
And you were very young.
I was 15 to 17. That was a long-term relationship for me at that age. It was huge for me. No family, chaotic lifestyle, breaking the law, no qualifications when I left school, getting into football hooliganism, tribalism, another form of masculinity. And although I understand that form of masculine energy being expressed in a kind of a tribalism.
You need that.
I needed that.
But not in that way.
But as you know, George, if boys aren't initiated, it's like the African proverb, right? Yeah. If young boys aren't initiated, they will burn down the village just to feel the heat. Mm-hmm. Why did I do that? Well, because they haven't been initiated into manhood. And that's fundamental to African culture, isn't it? And has been for thousands of years. But, we don't do that in the West.
And we talk about the warrior. Because in the West, the image of the warrior in the past was not wrong. It was not wrong that the man should be a warrior.
Yeah.
The trouble is, when there's no initiation to bring out the warrior out of a boy in a good, healthy way, then all that's left is...
Well, it's interesting because at 16 I tried to join the Merchant Navy, and so those things that were going on in me, right, deep in my soul, is that what was I bonding to? How was my identity being formed? Yeah, because that is the underlying kind of factors that are driving you, even though we don't realize it at the time. I'm attaching to something, I'm bonding to something. Those attachments are being formed and they're forming my identity because there's an attachment deficit, right? It's just, basic kind of psychology, right? So what am I bonding to? Well, I'm bonding to something that is destructive. I'm bonding to fighting. I'm bonding to alcohol. I'm bonding to violence. I'm bonding to the macho version of manhood. At 17, I'm covered in tattoos. I'm getting tattoos.
So all these tattoos are from that time?
Yes.
They look like that.
So between 17 and 18, I had 9 tattoos on my chest and arms.
Yeah.
What's that about? There's something deeper about tattoos. And I think it is to do with that tribalism. It's a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And an identity, some kind of identity is being formed and you're attaching to something. It's kind of anti-establishment because you're becoming kind of, some people call it deviant, like subculture. So you attach to a subculture because you are not getting established in mainstream society. You're not leaving school with qualifications and then going to university and getting a good job and earning good money. You're not doing that, right? You're going the opposite direction through crime, football hooliganism. So in answer to your question, it's about these other fundamental factors, George. Identity. I was attaching to destructive things. So the tribalism. Now look, I felt alive when I'm going up to Chelsea. On Saturday, right? I'm with a group of people. We're going up to watch our favourite football team. Okay, and this is coming out of from when I was 7, getting into football, right? And we go on a pub crawl, right? From the King's Road, a well-known road in London, King's Road. And we go on a pub crawl all the way down King's Road until we get to the football stadium. We're obviously a bit drunk. In the mid-70s, punk rockers were everywhere. And it was fantastic. They were so vibrant. Things were so alive, Punk rockers were everywhere with their spiky Mohicans and, all kinds of colours. And, we were into football hooliganism. Different tribalism was going down, Subcultures. This is what it's about. So I was attaching to a subculture. No family, no male role models, no qualifications. Long-term relationship with my girlfriend at the time. I even tattooed her name on my hand.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what kids were doing at school. They were doing self-made tattoos. And I actually tattooed my first girlfriend, my long-term relationship with Jane, from 15 to 17. I even tried tattooing her name on my hand and it worked.
You did it yourself?
I did it myself.
Wow. My dad did a similar thing when he was like 10.
Wow.
He still got the tattoo. broken heart or something.
Yeah. And it works, unfortunately. You know, it works, man.
So would you say that you were in a gang? Was it a gang, or more of a, because you had the football in common?
Not really a gang.
So crime wasn't the main objective, but it just happened.
It was similar to a gang, but it wasn't a gang. It was tribalism. And we'd go up and we'd, you know, the football thing. Now this is also, again, about masculinity. It's you're bonding to a, like I said, a kind of a macho version of masculinity that is about, you know, fighting, your hard exterior kind of thing. And you know, I that's what I was leaning toward. That's what I was attaching. So it was a tribal thing. So when we're in the crowd, in the end where your football team is, we called it, you know, the end where the football end, the end of the stadium.
Okay.
So your crowd, your supporters are in the same end, okay, and you're singing and you're chanting these songs against the other team supporters. Now that's interesting, because it's like singing, right? And you're singing all together, and you learn the songs, and you know the songs. What's going on there?
You give yourself to a greater purpose.
Yeah. So it's like, and it gives you what feels like life.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when you follow your team, you go to another team, you travel up on the train, you're singing songs on the train.
Wow.
You know, walking through the town, you're singing songs, you know, you're having a few beers. And then you try to go into the home team's football end, you try to steam into them and fight them to take over their end. And that's what we would do, you know. And it was a buzz. You know, it's like, yeah, we're going to take this team's end.
And there's a reason why it's a buzz, Nigel. And I want to say to people, because people look at this and they just say, well, that's negative, that's bad. Well, the action itself is bad, but where is it coming from?
Where's it coming
Why
from?
is it feeding something in your soul? Is your soul bad? Or is it just misdirected?
Yes,
because
exactly.
Men have a warrior energy that has to be directed at something, and also men are meant to gather together around something bigger and build. I mean, we're builders of the world, of our world, and everything around us. So,
that's right.
You know, it's easy to look at this and just other people can say, oh, well, that was just bad, so you need something new. Well, no, you need to direct the same energy towards something good.
Yes.
So you were in the shadows.
Yeah. But that's a very good point, because I think when you start to understand and you get some insights and clarity about actually what's going on at a deeper level, because you're probably trying to get needs met that haven't been met.
Exactly. Yeah.
By a healthy, strong father. You've had no strong, healthy, masculine presence, role models. You've not been initiated in manhood.
Let alone a whole group of them.
Men. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, this is why kids join gangs in inner cities. It's like a surrogate father. You know, they are bonding to a gang. And what do they get from a gang? Well, they get a sense of identity, initiation, rituals. You have to be tested. So, you know, I put myself through all of that. I didn't realize it at the time. So when I was 18, 19, I hitchhiked around Europe.
Yes, tell us about that. That's
right.
A story in itself.
Yeah, with a friend of mine. We both supported the same team. He was a Chelsea supporter like me, and we used to go to all the games together. But then we hitchhike around Europe together. So it's like, this is a bit different, but it was about adventure. It was about being tested. It's like, as Eldridge says, right, John Eldridge, you know, the first stage is, have you been the beloved son? Have you had a father who delighted in you, who was your beloved son, and you knew it? You knew that your father loved you and delighted in you, and actually has communicated that, taken you out and done things, you know, taught you things, fishing and whatever. If you've had that, you've got a good foundation and you won't doubt yourself. But lots of men don't have it. Countless numbers of men don't have it.
I didn't have it, yeah.
And so the next question in that next stage, late teens, early to late 20s, what is the issue? Do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes to learn skills, to hold a job down, to learn a trade, to pursue a woman, marriage, have children, stabilize, contribute to society? Do I have what it takes to do those things? Well, I can tell you now, if you've not had that foundation, you've got serious doubts. Because what is actually defining you is a deep sense of inadequacy. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the deepest wounds that we feel as a man in our soul, because we are wired for that. Men tend to hide in places that make them feel competent. If a man feels competent in something, that's where they hide out. But men don't tend to step out of what they feel competent in. Once they feel incompetent and inadequate, they don't go there. Mm-hmm. A lot of men don't go there.
Hence the division. You have intellectual men who purely just 90% just brain, or physical men who are practical, but they just
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're still hiding out.
Yeah.
In academia, they hide in their head.
Yeah.
Right? But they're cut off emotionally.
Yeah.
And they're emotionally shut down. So they're not able to feel certain things. But then so are men who are practical. Yeah. A mechanic, a builder. They also are not able to feel certain things because they're hiding out in a macho version of manhood. And they're giving messages like, don't mess with me, man.
Yeah.
You know? So in other words, you know, I'm holding the world at bay because I don't want a relationship with you.
Because you might discover how inadequate I actually am.
Exactly. It's like, I don't want you to get anywhere near that inadequate little boy that I suspect actually is in there somewhere. Yeah? Man, we do not want to go there, right? And so, so
adventure, you're hitchhiking.
Yeah, at 19, I'm still into football hooliganism, but I'm beginning to change a little bit.
Less crime, less violence. Same.
Yes, yeah, I think, yeah, actually, George, yes, I think there was less, because now when my girlfriend gave me up and she packed me up and went with another guy immediately, a guy that I knew that I was actually hanging out with.
Oh wow!
You know that went, that went deep, as it would do, because I had somebody who loved me, right?
Wow, I didn't know that this happened. Do you think this was repeating the story of your mom abandoning you?
Well,
because that was already inside of you.
Well, that's an interesting...
Being attached to that female and then boom. I don't know.
No, that is a very interesting insight, actually, and a penetrating question. And you're obviously a psychologist, George. No, I'm just kidding. But no, that's a great question. It's a very sharp insight. And I think probably yes. Because, you know, we're complex beings, you know, and I think, yes, it was being reduced, you know, criminal activity. I think I was mellowing out. I was starting to mellow out. But look, now I'm going to be talking about a major turning point again. Yes. Because, when I look back on my story, I love the idea of turning points because we all have them.
Yeah.
We all have turning points in our story, and they define and shape our identity for good or bad. And when we look back on those turning points, we connect the dots. It gives us a perspective on our story, and it can help us to have understanding and actually compassion on ourselves. Yeah. So I was mellowing down a little bit when I was 18 because I was wanting adventure. I hitchhiked around Europe and I was really looking forward to it, really excited about it, because I tried to get in the Merchant Navy when I was 16.
What happened?
I didn't get in.
Do you know why?
I didn't have any qualifications.
Okay.
And I was gutted. I really wanted to go in the Merchant Navy because I was longing for adventure even then, wanting adventure at 16.
With other men.
Yeah, with other men. Yeah, and well, yeah, interesting you should say that. Because maybe the football hooliganism, tribalism, was like unconsciously, trying to meet my own needs in a destructive way. But then Merchant Navy would have been a bit more positive. I didn't get in. And that also was an important sort of, oh man, another disappointment. So what did I do? I got my own adventure. That's why boys join gangs, because they are basically meeting their own initiation rites of passage. Because if his father isn't initiating him, then you basically create your own. Yeah. And that's what boys do. They create their own.
So the needs don't go away. If the world of men, let's say represented by the Navy, rejects you, then you'll be like, okay, I'm going to go to the other uninitiated boys. I'm going to go in the shadow then. Because the need doesn't go away.
Well,
I don't have a father.
Well, I think hitchhiking around Europe was another version of adventure because I didn't get it in the Merchant Navy. And I took my driving test when I was 17 and I failed. And then again, I took it again a year later when I was 18 and I failed again.
Okay.
Now look, let me tell you one thing, which I think you will know about, is that when men haven't been fathered and they haven't been parented, you take failure and disappointment really deeply. Because it's a reminder, it can be a deep reminder of, you're useless, I don't want you, I'm giving you away, I'm dumping you in this home, let somebody else look after you. So when you fail, it goes real deep because you lack the inner resources to be resilient enough to be able to keep perspective and think, it's not a major big deal, it's not a crisis, it's not a defining factor, and it's not the final verdict on me. But it feels like the verdict on you.
So for you, it was not a question of what you can do or should do better, but it just landed on your identity. It was no longer about, well, I should learn or I failed at this, but it was more about, I'm useless.
Yes. It lands on you and it lands on the wound. It lands on the wound because you haven't had the male role models and the support to be able to walk through that and to understand what that is about. As most men don't, right? In this society that is very sick. And so you have a huge vacuum. Lots of things, huge destructive things, rush into the vacuum. And so I was seeking for my own adventure. But again, you see, I'm being tested because that's what young boys do, right? In the teenage years, they test themselves. What's that about? Why do we need to be tested? Well, because you are now in the next stage of manhood. And if you haven't had the beloved son stage, you haven't been delighted in by your father or if of any father figure, you'll have serious wounds and doubts, huge vacuum, identity confusion. So what's filling the vacuum? Well, you try to get these needs for yourself, but you're like the lion cub in the jungle. You're going through life without a map. It's like, I don't know where to go. Where am I going? Who am I? And where am I going? I don't even know where I'm going. I don't know who I am. And you live by impulse. You live by instinct because you're like an animal. And you basically, people that have had serious foundational wounds, they live by instinct.
Right.
You live in a story of survival. And you live by instinct. You can't plan for the future. So you don't think ahead. You don't have discipline. You can't delay gratification because you are living for the moment. Because you're in a jungle. And so I'm in Europe. I'm hitchhiking around Europe.
Where did you go first? Which country?
We went to France.
From here to France?
Yeah. So we got the ferry to France and we hitchhiked across France. And we hitchhiked right down to the south of France.
Wow.
And, we're stopping off on the way and we have a tent, we got right down to the south of France. And it was great. It was, we're stopping off in vineyards, trying to get work, grape picking and things like that.
Okay, so you worked.
Yeah, we were trying to get work on the way, different jobs, and we got work in Germany, in Munich, working in a factory as well. So we're just doing different things, different jobs, whatever we can do. You meet other travellers. Oh yeah, this vineyard is wanting grape pickers, and you know what it's like. You just you meet other travellers and stuff like that. So I was, I realised I wanted to travel, and I've loved travelling ever since, and I still love travelling. So anyway, we hitchhike around Europe, and we go to the south of France, and we try to get to a kibbutz in Israel. We thought, that'd be a good thing. We wanted to do that, So we went down to Athens. We hitched all the way down to Athens in Greece, through Austria. So we went into France. Then we went into Germany, worked in Munich, went through Austria, hitchhiking all the way. And So this was being tested, you see. We were being tested. Do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
So in a sense, as I look back, it's like, that's what I was trying to give myself. Do I have what it takes? And I was providing that for myself. And actually I did have what it takes to some extent. And so we hitchhiked through Austria and then through Greece, right down to Athens. And then we got a ferry, or we tried to get a ferry to Israel to go on a kibbutz. Yeah? So we thought, oh yeah, that'd be a good idea. Go on a kibbutz, stay there for a few months. Lots of people do that. But we weren't able to do it. We didn't have enough money for the boat ferry. And there was another reason I can't remember. But anyway, we were stuck in this port called Piraeus. And we had about £6, English pounds left. We had no money, hardly any money left. And we were stuck.
So what did you do?
We thought, man, what are we going to do? So we were stuck there. We were a long way, man. This kind of port called Piraeus, quite near Athens. We thought, what are we going to do, man? So what we decided to do was hitch all the way back to Munich and get work, because we worked in Munich and it was a good place to get work. But it was a long haul and it was winter.
Oh my goodness.
And we had hardly any money. But before that, we got this work with this juggernaut driver. He was from London. And we basically built his juggernaut. The whole of his juggernaut was down and we had to build it up again. I mean, man, that was hard work. Really hard graft.
So at least you proved to yourself that you can work hard.
Oh, yeah. Because I'd worked on building sites.
Right.
I worked on a lot of building sites.
But before that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was a kid, when I left school, I worked in manual labour. Factories, building sites.
All right.
But I'd just walk around building sites and get labouring jobs because I had no qualifications. So I knew how to work. I could work hard. Labouring was hard, And so we kind of built up this guy's juggernaut thing.
But after that, something happened. I remember you telling me about it in terms of your hitchhiking adventures. Yeah,
basically we hitchhiked back to Munich, and we had no money, but I had to steal, so I became a good thief, and I had to steal to eat because we had no money to eat, and we were eating people's leftovers.
When was that? On that journey?
Yeah, from Athens back to Munich.
Okay, when you didn't have money.
Winter. We were sleeping rough.
So you tapped into survival mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But actually, I had lived in survival mode a little while, and probably was good at it. And I became good at it later on as I got older.
So what's the biggest thing that you stole on that journey?
Well, the biggest thing was money and a wad of cash at a train station. And we hitchhiked through Greece. It took ages to get through Greece. It was hard slog.
And then?
Yugoslavia, which was the old Yugoslavia.
Okay, yeah. Next door to us, more or less.
Yeah. So we hitchhiked through Yugoslavia and it was a hard slog, army everywhere, different country, communist.
Yeah.
And we looked a bit out of place, right? And anyway, we got to this little village, this little town, and we were going to spend our last pennies. We just had pennies left. We were sleeping rough. My friend was ill. Wow. He had asthma. Sleeping rough in the winter.
Wow.
And it was a long haul, really hard. And we're at this train station. We thought we'd spend our last few pennies on a train to Zagreb. And I just saw this wad of cash. Basically, I stole it. I stole the cash.
Was it a private person, citizen?
No, it was a train station.
Okay.
And there was a wad of cash there, but the guy that sold the tickets, he wasn't there. So I thought, I'm having that. We are hungry, we're cold, we're tired, we're in bad shape.
Yeah.
It's winter, we need a break, man. It's like, I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, I'm having that, Bearing in mind, I had a bit of a criminal background.
Yes.
And so I said to my friend, I said, okay, look, you look out for me. So I got the money, stuffed it in my army combat jacket. We're running down the road and we're singing, right, thinking we got away with it. Munich, Munich, here we come. I'm telling you, within 2 minutes, we were surrounded by police.
Wow.
In this small town. It was a big deal, man. It was a robbery in this small town in Yugoslavia. Tito was still president, communist country.
Wow.
And it was a big deal. People are coming out of their houses with planks of wood and all kinds of tools and that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And we're in the middle of the road in this little village just down the road from the station. It didn't last 5 minutes. And we're surrounded. Police cars. It's a huge deal, man. And we're surrounded by police. And obviously, you know, we don't speak any Yugoslavian. So all of a sudden, a police just whacks me around the head with a truncheon.
Wow.
And several police just severely beat me up with truncheons, pointing rifles at me and, you know, rifle butt in the face. And
wow.
well, I've got handcuffs on in the road and they're just beating me, man, with truncheons.
Wow.
And they broke my hand, but they didn't touch my friend.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Why do you think was that?
I don't know. I mean, it's probably because I did the robbery.
Yeah, that's a logical explanation there.
But maybe that was it.
Maybe that has something to do with that.
Yeah, yeah, because yeah, they didn't touch my friend. But anyway, me and my friend Pete, we knew that this was a major big deal. We probably knew that we were going to go to prison because this was like a big deal. It's a robbery in a communist country. They threw us in the van. My face is covered in blood. My hand is broken. Handcuffs. We get to the police station. And actually it's a relief to be thrown into the cells because I'm not getting beaten up anymore.
Yeah.
And we're both in the cell at the same time. We're both in the cell. And we're looking at each other, man. And we are scared kids, man. You know.
How old were you?
19.
19. Wow.
Yeah, my friend was 20, I think. But I was 19. You know, bearing in mind my background, and it's like now it's like I'm facing a big rap, you know, heavy rap, you know. So we kind of knew that we were going to go to prison. We didn't have any illusions about that. And sure enough, next day, you know, they took us in a van, drove us on a journey to this little village called Sisak, near Zagreb, and so we were in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was just 19.
What did communist prison look like to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is now
It's in the 80s, isn't it?
1979.
79, okay.
So this is a long time ago, man. This is over 40 years ago.
What was that like?
Well, I was thinking I was going to have to take more beatings because I'd been beaten up badly by the police. I was thinking, you know, am I going to carry on getting beaten up, you know?
Yeah.
And in the prison. And it's just okay.
Yeah, don't touch.
But actually, I didn't get beaten up. But I was in 3 different cells. And the first cell, I really got on well with the guys.
So the inmates were okay. It was the police that was
the police.
the problem.
Do you know, I even got on with the wardens. I learned to speak a little bit of Yugoslavian because...
That would have been Serbian, would it?
No, Croatia.
But I mean, Serbian must have been the main language of Yugoslavia, isn't it?
Well, where the village was, where I was in prison, the small town, is in Croatia now.
So so maybe that was the language then.
Yeah.
Or was Serbian the main?
Well, I know that the village, the town of Sisak, where I was in prison, is in Croatia now, because a good friend of my wife, a very good friend of my wife, is from that town.
Crazy.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
She's Croatian and she's from the very town that I was in prison in. And she was a child when I was in that prison, I found out.
Crazy. Yeah.
That's just wild, man. So I know it was Croatian. Yeah. So anyway, I learned to speak a little bit of, you know, you have to say something to the warden every time they open the door.
Like, don't hit me.
Yeah, can I go home? Yeah, but you know, I actually got on well. I mean, one guy, when I was in the first cell with, he tried escaping.
He tried escaping?
Yeah, because our cell was right by the road, and he used his spoon to dig a hole.
That's classic, isn't it?
It's classic. It was, yeah, it is a classic. It was brilliant. You know, we'd hide, you know. And,
did he get anywhere with that?
No, I don't think he did. I think he probably got caught. But it was just, I guess it was exciting, you know what I mean?
Talk about adventure, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, you know, I didn't want that type of adventure, but here I am in a communist prison. And I'm ended up in a communist prison cell.
What about, wasn't there a murderer there that you were telling me about?
Yeah.
That used to give you cigarettes or something.
Do you know, I actually remember his name. His name was Kostash. And he had this Mexican moustache, and he looked mean. But you know, he was a great guy. And he had a bit of a rep, you know. It's like, yeah, don't mess with this guy, you know, because it could cost you your life. Anyway, one day I'm in the shower, and because you only had a shower, I don't know when it was, once a week or something like that.
It's probably not the safest place to be.
No,
in prison.
Absolutely. Anyway, this guy is in the shower, and I'm in the shower with him, next to him. And it's like, okay, yeah. So,
that's the beginning of a wonderful friendship.
So I wanted adventure.
There you go.
Like, there you have it. But you know what? He didn't speak a word of English. Apparently he murdered this guy in a bar or something like that. Anyway, you know, we're trying to make conversation, and you know, he hardly any English, but he's trying to communicate to me. And one of the things he says to me, he calls me English, right? English, cigarette. I thought he was asking me for a cigarette, and I didn't have any cigarettes, okay? And I smoked at that time, obviously. And English, cigarette. And I thought, I don't have any cigarettes. What's he going to do to me if I don't have a cigarette, you know? And I said, no cigarette, no cigarette, something like that. And he said, okay, something like this. Anyway, we finished the shower. And then suddenly, he burst into my cell and he gave me about 200 cigarettes out of his own pocket. And at that time, I was sharing another cell with just one guy who was horrible. And I wanted to kill him. He was a horrible little guy.
Should have introduced him.
And he didn't give me any cigarette at all. He didn't give me a cigarette. Okay, never did he give me a cigarette. You always give somebody a cigarette, man.
Yeah.
And especially in prison. And well, actually, cigarettes are rare, actually. But anyway, this guy, he threw a whole pack of cigarettes, about 200 cigarettes, out of his own pocket. And I never forgot that. And this guy, he couldn't give me one cigarette. This guy, Kostash, with a bit of a rep, he was a bit of a nasty guy. He gave me about 200. Yeah.
Interesting.
So anyway, now I was in there, it's interesting, I was there 6 weeks. I was in Trinidad 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
It's like another trauma, right?
Wow.
So
prison maybe was repeating that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was
being taken somewhere.
It was exactly the
where
same.
you're supposed to belong because you're a criminal when you stole this thing.
Yeah, thank you, George.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
6 weeks there as well.
Do you know, it's funny, I've only just realised that. What I've just said?
Yeah.
I've just realised it was 6 weeks. And it was 6 weeks in Trinidad. But 42 days, you're counting every minute. We was in the cells nearly 24/7. We'd just walk around the yard 5 minutes a day. The food was horrible. And we just have a half a loaf of bread you'd have to make last. And, you know, I never knew how long I had to be there.
Wow.
Now, you learn to adapt. It's amazing what you can adapt to. And yeah, if you don't know how long you have to be there, that's the tormenting thing. So the British consulate were coming to visit us. Remember this guy? He was a Scots guy, a black beard. He looked like Cat Stevens, the singer. He used to be Cat Stevens. He converted to Islam. His name is, he got another name now, Yusuf Islam his name is now. But he looked like Cat Stevens, okay, the singer. Well-known singer in the 70s. And he was a bit of a dude, you know, this Scots guy who worked for the British consulate. And I got on well with this guy. And, you know, But the long and short of it is that my friend's father came up with some money, and I think that helped us to get out. And the British consulate, I think, did their bit. Anyway, 42 days, we were out of there. But the week before we got out, we were told that there's a very good chance we will get out.
Okay.
And we're excited, but you have to try to control your excitement. It's like, it feels like forever that I've been in this communist prison, man. I'm just a kid of 19, and I'm adapting to it. My hand has been broken by the police before I got in.
So you never had any doctor's attention?
Nothing. No medical attention. It is grotesque. My bone is sticking out here.
Wow.
And I had to heal on its own, and I was in agony, Nothing was done to it. So that was difficult. So the week before we actually did get out, we went to court, and we're trying not to get it too excited because it may not happen, that we could be on a plane back to London. We went to court. They're, jabbing away in Yugoslavian, obviously. And the long and short of it is they translate, you'll have to go back to prison because your defence counsel hasn't shown up. I'll tell you, that was one of the worst moments of my life up until that point. We had one more week to wait. It was the longest week of my life. I went back into the cell. The guy that I was sharing a cell with, he just laughed in my face. And I had to do everything I could to not attack him and beat his head, because I'm just a kid of 19, man. I'm in a communist prison. I'm scared. This is a big deal. We might get a long sentence in a communist prison. It's a huge deal, man. And he just laughed in my face. And somehow we get through the week, we went back to court, and, eventually they said that we can go now. And they released us. We're on a plane. We only just got out of the country because we nearly didn't get out of the country as well. Anyway, we come back to London, and that was the adventure over. And then shortly afterwards, I moved up to London with my friend because we didn't want to be in our hometown because it was a big deal in our hometown. It was all over the papers, and we moved up to London.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So at this point, before your hitchhiking adventure, you were not living in London anymore. You were living in Horsham. Was it Horsham? Yeah,
a town in the south, near the south coast of England. And I didn't want to stay in my hometown.
So that was in the papers?
Yeah, it was in the papers.
What you? Goodness me.
Yeah, just people coming up to me all the time, just because it was a big deal.
So then you moved to London.
Yeah.
What did you do there in terms of work?
Whatever I could. But I walked around the streets of London, man, just giving out leaflets. I had a job in the King's Road in a warehouse. But you see, I never knew what I was good at, George. And again, going back to the father wound. And, I went from one job to another. I lived by impulse, by instinct. I did find a job in London in this warehouse, like I say, and a couple of months I stuck it.
Is this when you got into drugs? Because I remember you telling me about drugs, especially things like heavy drugs.
Well, I got into drugs in Europe when we were hitchhiking in Europe. And I just got turned on to marijuana, to dope, and that lasted quite a few years. And
you had this experience, as far as I remember you telling me years ago, where you took something, I don't know what you took, but then you lost your mind for like hours.
Yeah, that was LSD.
Okay.
I mean, that was a bit later, but I got into smoking dope, marijuana in Europe with other travellers,
Okay. Yeah.
So I got turned on to that. But there's a lot of things happening when I'm 19 when I come back, because I saw my mother again for the first time. She was in Los Angeles. She'd emigrated to Santa Monica, in California. She'd married another guy and had a baby, and she was out of my life since I was like 13 when I first started getting in trouble with the police. 6-7 years later, reckless teenage years, criminal record. I've just come out of prison. I meet my mother again.
How?
she'd come back to England.
Well, how did you meet her? Even so,
She made contact with me.
Okay, not by accident.
Yeah, she made contact with me, with my foster mother.
Okay.
But it's like I'm 19, 20 now, and I'm like a different person. Radically different. I've got a criminal record. I've just come out of prison, right? I'm a confused kid, really. Yeah. But I'm also, when I was in prison, I prayed to God for the first time in my life. And actually that was also a major turning point. Because actually God heard my cry.
What made you pray to God?
I was desperate, man.
Costa, that guy made you pray to God.
It's like, no, I was bored, something to do. No, I was desperate. And, I was desperate. And I just was, God, help me, get me out of here. But I didn't even know who God was. I didn't know what God was. Yeah. I didn't even know if God existed, I just was desperate, But actually I found out God very much was real. And, when I was in London, I couldn't think about anything else but God.
Wow.
Really weird.
After the prison?
Yeah.
Wow.
I started to really change because I'd gone from a football hooligan to hitchhiking around Europe for adventure in prison, and I started to write poetry. Wow. I started walking through the forest. I started mellowing out. I was smoking dope, but I was changing. I was becoming a bit of a hippie, and actually I became a hippie. So I basically attached to another subculture. Right. Rather than football hooliganism. In fact, getting into dope mellowed me down. Because if I hadn't have done that, I maybe had stayed with the crime and ended up in prison in England.
Yeah.
And got into a violent crime or something.
Yeah. Heavy.
So actually, in a way, I mellowed out, and I went in another direction because I started thinking about God, writing, things like that, going for walks in the forest, really mellowing out,
LSD.
Well, as they say, cannabis is a gateway drug, and I didn't think so at the time, but it was.
For you, it was.
And it became a lifestyle. But I was searching for God as well.
So you already had spiritual experience that was following you.
Well, I wouldn't say I had a spiritual. I actually 2 years later, at the age of 21, from when I got out of prison, got back to England, met my mum for the first time. I was 20 now, which was just a surreal experience meeting my mother. So I hadn't met her before. I was 13.
What did that bring up in you?
Well, I wasn't interested. I was quite indifferent. But I was a confused, insecure kid, really. But I had a criminal record. I had no clue what I was doing, man, with my life.
And that encounter, after you met your mom, how did that impact you in any way or not really?
Well, I was still processing the fact that I'd spent 6 weeks in a communist prison. I'd been beaten up severely by police, which was a trauma in itself.
Yeah.
So I had the trauma of being beaten up by the police badly. The prison itself at 19 was a trauma. And now I'm, getting into drugs as well, thinking about God, and then my mum shows up. All of this is going on in my life.
Interesting.
At 19, 20. Big things. And, another turning point, yeah?
Yeah.
So meeting my mum again was another turning point. The prison was a turning point. And I'm living in London, and, I went to visit my mum, and it was just so difficult. Really difficult. She's got another child. She's married with another kid. And it's like a nice, close-knit, cosy family. But I don't fit in, because I've never fitted in anywhere, right? Because that's part of the wound with people from my background. You don't belong anywhere. You don't know where you fit. Wherever you go, you don't fit. And, that goes deep, because that's also about belonging and identity as well. So anyway, during my 20s, I basically attached to another subculture and become a hippie, really. And so I took a lot of drugs in my 20s. I'm in and out of jobs, labouring. But here's the thing. I had an opportunity to learn a trade. I could have become a plumber or a kitchen fitter. I had an interview to be a kitchen fitter. And on the interview, and this is the father wound right here, man, I had an opportunity to learn a trade, and it was a turning point, because I didn't have a clue what to do on the interview. I had to make a joint, not a marijuana joint, but I had to make this dovetail joint, or some kind of joint, to see if I could pass the interview, and they would take me onto the course, and I'd be trained as a kitchen fitter. And I really wanted to do it, because I thought this would be really good if I could learn a trade. That'll just set me up. I'll have a trade, I'll have something to turn to. Yeah? I froze on the interview. I didn't know what to do. I was standing there, I was looking, I don't even know what to do. And all the other kids were just getting on with it. They knew what to do. I tell you, that's a painful memory. Yeah. And I just looking at it, I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. And I froze. I remember the guy that was looking at us, the instructor, he was looking over at me, and I just didn't have a clue. I didn't know what to do. Wow. And I think I just walked out, and it never happened. I had an apprenticeship also in plumbing. I didn't have a clue. Didn't know what to do. That deep father wound, you have self-doubt. Yeah. I don't know what to do, because I never had anyone to teach me how to use my hands.
To bring the little boy out, to say, come on, I'll show you what you can do.
I had no one to do that, ever. And I never have. And so that goes deep.
So, Nigel, it seems to me now, as you were sort of getting into that new story after the prison in Yugoslavia, after meeting your mom, after having the spiritual, you pray to God, and you're beginning to live with the spiritual awareness of a new kind, and then getting into drugs. I'm just aware of the time, because we've been here for a while, and your story, you honored your story so well in telling it in so much detail, so I don't want to make this too quick, like the second part of your journey. It feels as though we've reached some point, another turning point at the time you're 19. It feels like this is chapter 1. So I think we should just do chapter 2 next time when you visit, instead of rushing too much. So, but before we wrap up for today, could you maybe give us a quick 2-3 sentences, just a summary of your life so far, where you're at in your heart, in your mind at this point?
Well, I don't know if you've heard of the saying, a mother gives you roots and a father gives you wings to fly. Roots and wings. If you don't have that, you've got no foundation to build on and on which to fly into your destiny and your true identity, because you've not been formed by what really should form you and shape you, your mother and father, home, trust, the essentials in those formative years. To sum up, I had no roots and no wings to fly. So, and I agree with what you said about chapter 1. I think, yes, it's a good way of looking at it. And as we kind of summarize really chapter 1 of my life, of my story, no roots and no wings to fly. And because of that, all of those symptoms that I explained in this first chapter, getting into trouble with the police, crime, a different identity being formed, football hooliganism, breaking the law, and then adventure, hitchhiking around Europe, prison, and now in London, I'm beginning to change and thinking about God, because I had prayed in prison in Yugoslavia, and I'm thinking about God all the time. I'm drawn to God, and spiritual things. But I've met my mother for the first time. So the summary of my first 20 years, it's, what comes to mind. There's any number of words that you could put it in a nutshell. It's not easy to put it in a nutshell, but I would put it in a nutshell by saying that I had no roots and no wings. And so therefore, I'm like a broken winged bird locked up inside a tiny cage. not able to fly. Because the broken wing is because of the no roots and the no foundation and the trauma of my early childhood. So I've got no roots, no identity that's been formed. So in terms of flying, I'm playing catch up. And in fact, I'm playing catch up for the next probably 30 years or more, which we'll go into in the next chapter.
We'll go into this in the next chapter, yeah. And I just want to say to the people that actually the next chapter, in many ways, there's great redemption, because you were a marginalized kid. But just to give a little bit of a spoiler, you got educated. You became a teacher. You also studied in, was it university or college in the United States? University,
I mean,
and university here as well.
I mean,
the street boy, we need to give. I know you don't think much of that, of your own achievement in terms of the mainstream, what was available, but just look at it, the street boy. Then not only did I have a teaching degree and became a teacher in a school, but also had a university degree. And how many university degrees actually?
Well, I've got 2.
There you go.
But I've got another teaching qualification as well. But obviously, we're moving into chapter 2 or 3 now in my story, which is all part of my story and organic to my story. Yeah.
So there has been a lot of change, and we're going to go into this next time.
Yeah.
Nigel, that was great, man.
Well, thank you, George.
Thank you.
And thank you for honouring me and giving me the opportunity to speak about what has been chapter 1 of my story.
Yeah.
And I'll see you next time.
Yeah, looking forward to next time.
Yeah.